Welcome to a special edition of Modern Wall Street from the New York Stock Exchange. It's hard to believe, but August is drawing to a close, and that means Labor Day is right around the corner. Once we get back from the holiday weekend, U.S. governments and global central banks will be back to business. So ahead of that pause in the global markets, I'm joined by Jim Rickards and Kevin Massengill. Many of you may know, but Jim Rickards is a best-selling author as well as market advisor and attorney, and Kevin is a former executive at Raytheon, and he's also the CEO and founder of Meraglim Holdings. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me.
Great to be with you, Remy.
Well, it is hard to believe, but the month is almost over. We started the week with plenty of geopolitical risk in the spotlight, but now we're focused on economic data and what we'll see from the central banks. So what is your assessment of the market right now?
Well, you know, Remy, there's no shortage of market indicators, geopolitical indicators, but of course right now all of our hearts and prayers are with the people in Houston. It's great to be here at the New York Stock Exchange to see the lit up with the Texas flag that shows a unity in America. That's great to see. In terms of the market indicators, one of the main things I'm watching, we all know volatility is close to all-time lows. There's a lot of complacency, but every reason to think that that's about to end shortly. It's a very difficult time of year. As we know, September, October historically have been very volatile times. The North Korean situation has calmed down for the minute, but has not gone away. Kim Jong-un shows no signs that he's going to pivot away from his nuclear weapons testing and his missile testing. And then we also see that there's continued disinflation. We see bad data coming out of housing, bad data in autos. So all of these things indicate that the U.S. economy is slowing. The Fed has blundered once again by tightening into weakness. The stock prices are up based on forward projected earnings. Looks like those earnings are not going to be realized. The economy is slowing. World trade is slowing. So I look for a very volatile and perhaps significant drawdown in the stock market in the months ahead.
And indeed, Jim, as we head into the holiday weekend, we have more data in terms of jobs figures tomorrow morning. So we'll be monitoring the non-farm payrolls as well. But I do want to take a closer look at Meraglim Holdings. So Kevin, could you tell me about how this company was formed and how your predictive analytics work?
Sure, terrific. So it's actually a spin-off of some work that Jim and some colleagues did with the CIA several years ago when they were trying to figure out whether or not it was possible to build algorithms that could mine data out of the capital markets that were applicable to security and intelligence interests. They could. What was interesting to that as well was that you could also do that for global macro events, that there was a real utility to that. And so expanding on that original program, we blended Bayesian inference, 200-year-old math based out of the intelligence community, behavioral psychology, complexity science, 60-year-old math out of Los Alamos and others, computing with words, textual analysis, which our partners at IBM are helping with Watson, and just historical perspective. That blend of a team science is what we think makes this unique.
If I can just give you a very concrete example of that, Remy, that Kevin's description tied to current market data. So the employment report is coming out Friday morning. It absolutely doesn't matter. If it printed 500,000 jobs and 3.5% unemployment, I don't expect that, of course, but if it were just a blockbuster report, it would have no impact on what the Fed's doing. The reason for that is the jobs were mission accomplished 2 years ago. The Fed's not worried about jobs. The employment market's great. They're worried about inflation, or specifically disinflation. And in the last, so far this year, in eight months, disinflation has gone from inflation core PC has gone from 1.9 to 1.8 to 1.6 to 1.5, now 1.4. It's moving in the wrong direction. That's the kind of data we look at that a lot of people aren't as focused on.
And Jim and Kevin, I think the distinction we need to make with Meraglim is that you guys do focus on capital market theory. So I do want to get your assessment in terms of financial threats. What are you seeing right now, Jim?
Well, the biggest one, and I'm surprised it's not getting more attention, of course, is North Korea. There's something that the French expression is la logique de guerre, the logic of war. And basically, nobody wants a war. Everyone understands a war would be horrific. But wars happen anyway. Why do they happen? They happen because they have their own logic, independent of the logic of diplomacy. So in this case, North Korea is saying, we need the nuclear missile program. We have to have it. The U.S. is going to destabilize us. They want to reunify with South Korea. They want regime change. Gaddafi gave up his nuclear weapons. He got killed. Saddam gave up his nuclear weapons. He got killed. So Kim Jong-un is saying, I need these nuclear weapons to protect me. Over on the United States side, we're saying you absolutely cannot have these weapons. There's no middle ground there. So when you have these two, we're an existential threat to them. They're an existential threat to us. when you have that situation, all the diplomacy in the world won't help. I hope it does, I pray it does, but the war's coming. The market seems to be ignoring it. It reacts a little bit when there's a launch, and then 2 days later everything goes back to normal. You can see this war coming probably early 2018.
And market volume has been thin this week, so we have been seeing a lot of volatility in terms of market action. But I do want to get to the name of your company, Meraglim Holdings, especially since what I know, that word is intelligence or spies. So can you tell me what's behind this name?
Yeah, it's a great story. So everybody's heard the story, nobody's heard the name. So everybody grew up hearing the story of the 12-man Crown Prince reconnaissance team that Moses forms to send into the Promised Land. Now, that gets translated down through time as spies, but today we'd actually translate that in a military context. We'd call it reconnaissance, right? And what we wanted to do is convey the idea of going out to look for risks and opportunities. And of course, the 10 famously come back consumed with the risks. 2, Joshua and Caleb, famously see the opportunities. And Jim and I thought the Meraglim in Hebrew, or the Meraglim anglicized, is the proper Hebrew name of that reconnaissance team Moses sends. And we thought that was just a fantastic allegory for what we're doing for our clients.
That's very intriguing in terms of the story as well as the name for your company. So last but not least, before I let you gentlemen go, I do want to ask about what's been on your summer reading list. Jim, I'm sure plenty of fans out in the audience have been reading your books. But what are you guys reading?
Well, to riff off Jim's earlier comment, David Halberstam's written probably the single best volume on the first Korean War. So I would highly recommend people pull out The Longest Winter, review that. He's not only an excellent historian, but he's an excellent prose writer. So it's very, very enjoyable to read. I highly recommend people get re-blued on that. To Jim's point, we're going to go back through this again, and it would help to have historical context.
I'm reading Scale. It's a bit of a heavy lift, but I highly recommend it. The book's called Scale. It's by Jeffrey West. Jeffrey's last 2 jobs, head of the Los Alamos National Laboratory and head of the Santa Fe Institute. So probably one of the finest living theoretical physicists in the world. But what he's done, and this is sort of what we're doing at Meraglim, he has teamed with biologists, mathematicians, and others, what's called team science, to crack the code in terms of how physics relate to biology and how you can use physics in other fields. That's what we're doing at Meraglim. We're taking physics, that's in some ways established science, bringing it into capital markets, understanding capital markets as complex dynamic systems, and getting fantastic results.
Okay, Jim and Kevin, thank you so much for joining me today, and thank you so much for insight and analysis.